Hey everyone, welcome to the final week of our series, Welcome In. We've been exploring what it means to create hospitable, welcoming, just for you kinds of spaces around us for our faces and places. This week, as we celebrate Christmas, we reflect on the hospitality that God has shown us. Here we go. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, I'm Drew. I'm one of the pastors around here. I've been able to be in Las Vegas for 10 years, which I'm super stoked about, particularly because I come from Illinois, and today's a great day to not be in Illinois. In all seriousness, I hope that all of your loved ones and friends back in the Midwest are doing all right. It is a beautiful, beautiful day to be together, and we love being together. Honestly, I'll say more about this as we go along, but I just want to say welcome to the kids' table, right? You saw it in the video. There is a place for you here. I got to be honest, I actually prefer the kids' table. Is anybody with me? I think adults are fine. I think y'all are cool and all that, but the kids' tables were. In fact, earlier today, I was chatting with some kids out here who looked awesome for Christmas, little bow tie and everything. I got invited to play freeze tag, and I was like, that's a hard guess. That's going to happen right now. There's food fights, the food is better, the conversation is funnier, you never know what's gonna happen, it's really, really great, and there's always space. They just squeeze in and make a little bit of space, and that's kind of what we hope Christmas is around here. That we just have made some space, and I hope that if you're finding your way here for the first time, or any of you who are out of town, anybody here from out of town? I met some LA just over here, some others coming in to visit. Super stoked that you're hanging with some great people in Las Vegas. Our hope is that kind of the living room setting set up around campus, the coffee, the hot cocoa with more than enough marshmallows. Hopefully nobody skimped on the marshmallows. The photo op and all the other things that just created a space for you. If you were here earlier, you may have caught the jazz combo as well. Did you catch those guys? Oh my goodness, that crew. They were so good. If you were late, we love you. It's totally cool. We're glad you made it, but the jazz combo was killer. Listen, we just want there to be a space that you step into and say, I had a place here before I knew I needed one. Because honestly, that's the gospel. Like, that's what Jesus did for all of us. This is the name that we bear as followers of Jesus. This is just how we want to live. Where when people arrive in our orbit, they find a space that was kind of ready-made for them with a welcome in that just says, there's a place for you here, kind of like the kids' table in the video. We all know what it is to show up somewhere and not realize if there's space for us or not. And if you think about it, that's kind of the Christmas story. Y'all remember it. I don't know how you all, what your traditions are, but one of ours is Charlie Brown Christmas, right? You guys anybody Charlie Brown Christmas people, right? So there's Linus reads this story, and in Luke chapter 2, it starts something like this, right? That Joseph and Mary travel to this hometown of Joseph's, Bethlehem, to register in this census. And they find when they get there, there's really no room available for them. If you grab your Bible or a family Bible somewhere along this week in Luke chapter 2, you'll see this story unfold. It sounds like this. It says, while they were there, the time came to give birth. She gave birth to a son, her firstborn, and she wrapped him in a blanket and laid him in a manger because there was what? No room. This is how Jesus' life started, but we don't think that's how anyone's life should be around us or in this journey of following Jesus. We want there to always be space. In fact, we wanted to look a little bit more like what my friend Grant experienced one Christmas holiday. When I lived in Illinois, I did high school math teaching and football coaching for a little while, but then I got to be a youth pastor in a church. And so I would gather up kids on Christmas break, especially on New Year's, so that at least the number of bad decisions would go down by a little bit. And so we gathered in a home and we invited all these people into a home. We set the neighborhood, we picked the place and said, everybody come over. And as kids were arriving, we're just playing games, we're laughing, we're having a great time with everybody. And then in walks one of these guys. He's a junior or a senior at the time. I think he was a senior, 17 years old. His name was Grant. And Grant walks in and his eyes are wide open, like silver dollars. There's no white part of his eye we couldn't see. And we're like, what's wrong with you? And he goes, you won't believe what just happened. And we're like, we'd love to hear it. So he says, this is what happened. I pulled into the neighborhood. I see all of your cars. I knew you were all here, so I walked right up to the door. I rang the doorbell. And as soon as I rang the doorbell, the door flung open, and this woman escorted me to the back porch of the house, where there were people everywhere in the middle of conversation, playing games. Coins were flying and all kinds of craziness going on. And before I knew it, there was a seat for me at the table. Everyone knew my name. They had dealt me in. I had some money, and somebody cracked me a beer. And at that point, I knew I was in the wrong house. He got up and ran out and came into the front door of the house we were in, breathing heavily, eyes wide open. But what I love about Grant's experience is I don't know what was going on with these mid-40s people who at the time we judged, but that's actually me now. That's sad. They just had space. They just said, come on in. We got a seat for you. We'll find a chair. We'll squeeze in. Let's do this. It was a really amazing place. And I just wonder if, even though the story of Jesus began with no room, what we are finding as the people of Canyon Ridge is that if we just make a little more space for the things of God and the people of God, really good things show up. In fact, I want to encourage you to reflect for just a minute. At the end of the year is kind of a good time for this. If your life was a table, who gets a seat at your table? Who are the people you invite to shape and influence you? Who are the kind of people that have a voice with you? Who are the people that when you look at you in the mirror, you have become something because of those people in your life? What makes us followers of Jesus is that we prioritize and make space as much as we can, little by little, never quite as much as we wanted to. We just make space for God and the things of God in our lives. We make space for Jesus in our life. And followers of Jesus, tell me if I'm wrong, but here's what happens. When we make even just the smallest space for Jesus, he does way more with it than we thought he could. He does good in our lives that we didn't expect. It felt so sacrificial. It felt so hard to just carve out this little corner. Jesus steps in and does something we could not have anticipated or expected. In fact, if you look across the life of Jesus, don't stop in Luke chapter 2. Don't let Linus read the whole story. Go past that part of the story. What you'll find is that Jesus encounters all kinds of people, and they fall pretty much in two categories. People who had no space for him, no time for him, and no interest in what he was saying, and people who made even the smallest amount of space. And as you look through, just watch what happens in those two groups of people's lives. We've all been those kind of people along the way, that first group who doesn't really have any space. Too busy, going too fast. Maybe, if I'm being honest, for me, sometimes a little too self-important or too sure that I was right, pretty sure that I had it figured out along the way until life came alongside and just said, nope, you don't know what you're talking about. And suddenly there was a little bit of fresh space in my world. Among the worst that Jesus encountered were the self-righteous religious who had little to no space for anything other than what they already thought. And that's the last thing we want to be around here. Those are the kind of people for whom only Jesus would mess up what they already had going. We're just the kind of people who have realized that when Jesus gets involved, things get better. So we just invite him to mess up how things are going as often as possible. It's those kind of people across the story of Jesus whose lives got turned right side up. Guys like Simeon, who spent his whole life waiting and anticipating what God would do, only to see it happen in his final days. Or this woman named Anna, who got married young. Most people in the first century did. Probably married somewhere in her teenage years and was only able to be married for 7 years. No kids that we know of. Husband passed away, and from that moment, she said, I'll give the rest of my life to whatever God has in mind for me. For the next 60 plus years, she just served the people of God, only to find that one day in the temple, in walks this young couple with a new baby named Mary and Joseph. And she gets to be one who today we still talk about welcoming Jesus' arrival. You could talk about Andrew or Nathaniel, these young men who had followed other people but saw something different in Jesus and joined a group of people who would share what God had done, who would share with others, who would share with others, who would share with others, that would lead to millions of people today, and all of us 2,000 years later sitting in a room talking about this man named Jesus. These are the kind of people we want to be, with just enough space to invite God to do something that maybe we weren't expecting. In fact, those are the people whose lives just get changed in all the best ways, not only in the time of Jesus, but in today across this church, Canyon Ridge, and many other churches like it. This is, like I said, this is the kids' table. We're the ones who make space. We're the ones who have time. In Jesus' day, the kids' table looked like those who were paralyzed, helpless and dependent. They had enough space to listen to what Jesus might have to say. The sick with leprosy, the helpless, or the marginalized and excluded, the ones who were possessed, feared and avoided, the widows who were kind of placeless and nameless in the first century, the prostitutes who were judged and condemned, the tax collector, a traitor, unwelcome on either side of the aisle. A grieving father, a bleeding woman, children often dismissed in the first century as little more than property until they came of age. All of these people, self-aware enough to know they needed more than what they brought, and when they made just a little more space for Jesus than the others, he turned their lives right side up. Followers of Jesus, is that your story? What felt like a sacrifice, making just a little space, Jesus did more than you could imagine. He takes a little corner carved out and turns it into vistas of possibility. He takes a little effort on our part and adds a strength we have a hard time describing. In fact, it's so remarkable, not only that these people made space for Jesus, but what he did when he stepped in there. Those marginalized and excluded, they found themselves included and surrounded, a fresh identity. The helpless found them who had been avoided all along the way were embraced and welcomed in. Those who were judged and condemned did not find like even a cross-armed, frowny-faced, tolerant Jesus. What they found was a welcoming, inviting, let's sit down and have a meal, kind of forgiveness, fresh start. Those who had been a traitor to their own people found themselves trusted by Jesus. Those who were grieving were comforted. Those who were sick were healed. What I'm saying, all I've really been saying is this. I just want to remind you, followers of Jesus, and any of you who are even remotely curious in his direction, Jesus goes to work wherever he is welcomed. The Christmas story is not a powering up, powering over, lorded over, force his way in kind of arrival, is it? It's a vulnerable, subtle, in a manger, welcoming the lowest class of society, shepherds kind of arrival. And this is the way Jesus shows up in our world, not weak, but meek, adjusting his strength to ours, saying, I'll make space for you. Will you make space for me? I don't know where you've been, what you've gone through, what you're going through right now. I know Christmas is a time where we put on our shiny and our best and we try to show up well for the people who've made space for us at their table, and I get it. I just want you to know that Jesus meets us in whatever condition we find ourselves. He stands available, welcoming us, not in a begrudging, intolerant, why can't you get it together kind of way, but I've been waiting. You welcome me in, I'll go to work. I could tell you story on top of story. I could go person by person across the stage of the awesome musicians who kind of invited us into a cool experience along the way. I haven't asked their permission, so I won't tell you their story, but if you got a chance, you should hear what God is up to in their lives. I can look out right now at a number of people across this room in the different ways God has been and will show up in people's lives with just the smallest crack. I could tell you about a guy named Joe who on this night is having a challenging time because of a tough loss in his family many years ago, still a challenge today. But when years ago his life nearly ended in a tragic work accident, he had to ask the question on the other side, maybe there's more than this to my life than I thought. His wife brought him along to a place like this, and people surrounded, and one question after another, not believing right away, but belonging immediately, found a place, a purpose. And if you met him today, you would not know that he hasn't been here forever, just loving people right where they are, full of joy, connecting with people right and left. When there was a day he said, I literally don't have any friends. Today is such a different day for him than that day because he made just a little bit of space. Cleared a space at the table and welcomed Jesus in. He always goes to work where he's welcome. I could tell you a million stories, but honestly, I'm just a guy on a stage with a microphone. You're actually sitting around some people who probably mean way more to you than I do at this point. So here's what I want to encourage you to do, is ask them. If you think God has done anything in their lives or they have given you any inclination whatsoever that God matters in their lives, just ask them why. Ask them what happened when they cleared just a little bit of space. Because here's the story of the followers of Jesus I know. We made a little bit of space, Jesus did a lot of stuff. We made a little bit more space, Jesus did a lot of stuff. Made a little bit more space, and time after time after time, we've just become the people who do anything we can to make a little more space for what God wants to do. And so if you're starting out from the very first time, or you're just trying to find your way back after a long time, we're the kind of people who just clear a little space and invite God to do something we can't do on our own. People around you have stories. Followers of Jesus, do you have stories? Can I get a head nod from anybody who follows Jesus? You got stories? Look around. If somebody's head is going up and down and you're willing to hear their story, just give them like a fist bump right now and say, I'll hear your story. I'll give you 15 seconds. Go, right? All right, if you're 3-4 seats down the aisle, air fist bump counts, okay? We got hot cocoa, we got chocolate, we got couches. Sit down and tell a story for 30 seconds before you go off to an epic dinner together and get on with Christmas Eve. The stories that God writes are the best stories, and they're always written where Jesus is welcome. What would it take for you to create just a little more space in your world for what God has in mind? You've already begun. You showed up here. You loved those people enough. You made this time. You made that trip. You braved the crowds that are crazy on Christmas. Listen, driving in Vegas is a risky proposition on any day, much less in the Christmas season, right? If you're one of the bravest people we know and you're just trying to do this thing on your own, you're just trying to find your way back, you're not around other people. You're just doing your thing. We would love to be people around you. We'd love to come around you. There's a place for you to belong here, no matter what your question is, no matter what you believe, no matter what you've experienced, no matter where you find yourself. Because what we're finding is that not only when we give Jesus a seat at a table, he has so much good in mind for us, we also find this crazy reversal that we think that our invitation is the beginning of Jesus' work in our lives, and when we realize that, we just find out he's been at work for a long time, right? This is in the Christmas story as well. You remember this, right? For hundreds of years, Jesus' presence was announced. There were wise men who began traveling for a really long time. You guys have seen the nativities around town, right? Not like the inflatable ones that get really sad during the day, you know what I'm saying? Like the plastic ones. Our neighbors, I don't know what happened at my neighbors yesterday, but we came out today, and one of the wise men's head was missing. So listen, don't believe the story just because you see it. It was a mess. My point is, the story of Christmas didn't just begin on Christmas. It began long before that. And the work that God was up to in the people of God for Jesus' arrival, even the people who Jesus would show up to in their lives, began long before. And I'm just wondering, having found yourself in a place like this, could you look back over recent weeks, months, and years and see how God has already been at work, placing people in your lives, creating a kind of discontent or dissatisfaction where once things seemed to be enough, but lately there's a gap. There's just something there that's like something else has to fit there. Something else must go there. We have to do something different with this. All of these are ways in which God has been preparing and inviting you to create some space for him. It may be in the very place of unmet desire, or the very place of deepest struggle, or the lack that you've been sensing that God is saying, I have something better in mind for you. This is how generous God is. At some point, the things that seem in the world to promise satisfaction just don't, and they cause you to look for something else. See, followers of Jesus, I bet if you listen to them, you'll hear these kind of stories too. Hey, the thing that used to work just didn't work anymore. I had to look for something else. The best laid plans didn't pan out. I just wonder how God might be stirring in your life, inviting you to make just a little bit more space. Because it's not just true that Jesus works wherever he is welcomed. He has been at work already so that we are welcome with him. This is the Christmas story. His arrival was God entering his creation, which it's crazy that there was no room for him at the end. Mind-boggling. Like, if you believe anything about what Jesus said, that he was God-made man who would give his very life so that anything that ever offended God about us, past, present, or future, would be taken care of, and that he would raise again to a new kind of life, inviting us to live freely with him, in friendship with him. If you believe any of that, then it's mind-boggling that the people he created had no space for him, isn't it? He had been at work for a long time so that the moment we would welcome him in, we would realize it was him welcoming us all along. What feels like us inviting him in, followers of Jesus, just tell me if this is true. What feels like us making an invitation, the moment we do that, it's an invitation from him into all kinds of fresh space. God's been at work in each of our lives and in all of our lives for a long time, making space for anyone and everyone. It's why on the night before he gave his life, he would look at his closest followers over a great dinner, by the way. Does anyone have a great dinner ahead of them later this evening? Listen, I'm already dreaming about some really great food in the next few days. He sits across a great dinner with friends and he says, trust me, there's plenty of room for you in my Father's home. If you're Grant Zimmerman at the door, you are ushered to the back porch. That's my translation. There's plenty of room for you in my Father's home. Home is a place of connection, a place of intimacy, a place of friendship, a place of family. Jesus is not saying, I'll do something to you. He's not saying, would you do something for me? He says, I will be with you. He says, if that weren't so, wouldn't I have told you I'm on my way to get a room ready for, who does it say? For you. And if I'm on my way to get your room ready, I'll come back and get you so that you can live where I live. Jesus is always inviting us. I will be with you, he says. I'll be with you, I'll be with you, I'll be with you. And the question just on the other side of that statement is, will you be with me? Isn't this the question of every relationship we ever step into? Family, friend, spouse, or other? I'll be with you. I'll offer myself and who I am to you, piece by piece. Will you offer yourself to me? This is what Jesus invites us to. He's been preparing us for it for so long, and he's saying, the moment you invite me in, let's go. In fact, in a letter at the beginning of the book of Revelation, in Revelation chapter 20, the same guy who wrote what I just read, he wrote this on behalf of Jesus. He said, look, Jesus is saying, I stand at the door and knock. If you hear my voice and will open the door, I will come in, and we will share a meal together as, what does it say? Jesus is not waiting for you to get your act together. He's not waiting for you to fix your problems or get over what's been hurting you. He's saying, just invite me in. We'll do this thing together. Let's share a meal. In the first century, no more intimate space for friends to sit down than to sit down and share a meal. Jesus says, this is what I want for you. But the question is there a seat at your table? I asked you at the beginning, if your life is a table, who gets a seat? Christmas is the perfect time to ask this simple question. If your life is a table, is there any space for Jesus? For us who are followers of Jesus, we just want to make more and more space. We invite him to our table and find out it was his table all along, and we just say, let's go. And it is so good. It's messy, it's clumsy. Yes, we mess up. Yes, some of us are terribly annoying, and we bother each other and all the kinds of things along the way because we're broken and we're people. But Jesus, piece by piece, puts us together. If you're the kind of person who wants to see what kind of good can come about, I would just encourage you, do whatever you can to make a little more space for God to have his way in your life. What makes us followers of Jesus is we just figured out us making our own way and doing our own thing just didn't work out that great. And his idea is way better. Not always easier, but way, way better. So this week, followers of Jesus, I encourage you, share the stories of how Jesus has welcomed you in. And for all of us, let's keep taking steps to create space for Jesus in our lives and for one another. If there's any way we can support you along the way, we'd love to. Head over to canyonridge.org. You'll find everything you need to know along with a way to get a hold of us. If this was helpful to you, I encourage you, send it to a friend and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you soon.